Hello everyone, and welcome to our Leadership in Action webinar about how to cultivate a growth mindset in virtual teams. It is our second series with many more to come, so make sure to subscribe to our channel to access all upcoming sessions. My name is Izabela Jucha, and as a people and product specialist working for Fanshawe Corporate Training Solutions, I will be moderating this session. So let me tell you a little bit about Fanshawe CTs for those that don't know us. So we basically focus on providing the training and business solutions that directly impact workplace performance. So we try to understand your needs, understand the gaps that are currently visible in your business or your day-to-day life, and we try to tailor our training approach that would help us to understand your specific needs, resulting in new avenue of growth in productivity, engagement, and retention. So if you have any questions around those aspects, please reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to help. So, as I mentioned before, we have a very, very special guest with us today. Melissa, she spent 20 years growing her career from the front line up to an executive position, leading teams upwards of 500 people. It was in a leadership role that she spent a lot of time creating without realizing the happy leader method, which now is the model for associate development she teaches through her consulting company, Happy Leader Enterprises. And for those that haven't had the chance, there was a very, very good conference happening just before all this lockdown. I know, I've been there, exciting times. So we had a chance to be part of it, all women's lead. And basically throughout this project, she continued to use her passion for helping people and helping others find happiness as well. So not saying too much of it, I'm passing over to you, Melissa, and for everyone else, I will be moderating the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat to interact with us, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Izabela. So, hi everybody. I hope you're having an amazing Wednesday. I think what day it is. I think we're all in the position where the days blend. So, like Izabela said, I'm super excited to be here today, and I do. My company really does focus on leadership, sales, and operations, and really with a people first approach. So when I got asked if I would help support a growth mindset presentation, I was super excited about that because it is something that I'm really passionate about, because I do really believe the more that we can put into our people, the better for all of us, because if we can get our teams to stay and we can get our teams to be engaged and really see their ability to succeed, then we all win. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I've put into the presentation about 3 or 4 times where I will stop and see if there are any questions. So I'm not looking at the chat as we go. So if there are questions, feel free to throw them in there. And then I will take some pauses throughout, and then a decent amount of time at the end as well to cover off any questions, or if you want to have any discussion. Really, I'm a big believer that whatever works for you and your learning style is what's most important. So totally open to anything as we go. So to get us started, now we're going to have, there we go. To get us started, I want to talk a little bit about sort of where we're sitting right now in this new virtual world. I feel like, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one, that we have used the term unprecedented time probably more in the last 4 weeks. I feel like even in the first week of all of this, than probably in our entire lives. And that is the reality of where we're sitting. What The way that I look at what's going on right now and why we're looking at different things and different skill sets that we need to be fostering in this sort of new world is because of the fact that we're really living in this world right now of ambiguity, where we don't really know what's happening from one day to the next. And so if we think about that and think about how that makes people feel and think about how that makes ourselves feel, it really does mean that we're in this situation right now where we're seeing our stress levels elevate, and we're seeing the challenges of what happens with that really come to the front. And so there's a lot of articles that are going around right now that are talking about the fact that we're seeing real leaders rise in these situations. And what I know and what I believe is that people can do almost anything if they understand what's happening. And where people start to get uncomfortable is in that place of unknown, is in that place where I don't know what's happening next. And if we think about sort of where we're at right now, it's probably the most unknown of anything. So what I've noticed is that if we think back to when this all started about a month ago, we were told, we're going to stay home for 2 weeks. And I think people were kind of able to wrap their heads around that. It was like, okay, 2 weeks, we can do that. And then it became another 2 weeks. And people were like, yeah, I started to notice sort of that shift. You start to notice that people are like, okay, but you said 2 weeks, and now you're saying another 2 weeks. And then now they're saying 4 more weeks. And so that this place of unknown and everyday changing is really putting people in this position where stress is high. And when stress is high, what we know is that people don't act at their best. So we've got to step back and look at what are some of the tools we can give to people to help support them through these really unique times. We know that people are working sort of in ways that are outside of what they're used to. So how can we help them through that? So if we think about what that looks like, and we think about times of stress, when stress goes high, our body's instinctual reaction is to protect ourselves. We go naturally into that fight or flight mode. And if we think about what that fight or flight mode is about, it's about survival. So when the body is trying to instinctually survive, we do things, we go back to ways that have protected us in the past. And so it's really about sort of thinking about what does that look like? What's that protection look like? And it's an odd example, but if we think about a couple when they're, say, going through a separation or a divorce, right? You think about what happens. These are people who at one point loved each other and were connected and communicated exceptionally well. And then we put them in this very high stress situation where the stakes are really high and what happens is really important. And all of a sudden, their communication style changes. Their support of each other changes. All these things start to change because I've gone into protection mode. And when you go into that protection mode, it becomes quite selfish. It becomes quite inward, where you're trying to protect yourself first. And that's natural. And that's a very extreme example. However, that's sort of where people are at right now. We go into that self-protection mode. And in that self-protection mode, we start to go back or to draw on things we've used throughout our life to keep ourselves safe or to protect ourselves. And those aren't always our best ways of thinking, and they're not always our best ways of behaving. And for leaders, it's super critical for us to pay attention to that right now. But for our teams, it's important for them to even do some self-reflection on that as well. So if we think about what happens and sort of how the brain processes these challenges, the information goes in through the brain stem and it hits our feeling part of the brain first. So we're emotional, we feel first, and then it hits the rational side of our brain. So when we're looking at how do we support the team, we've got to recognize that there's going to be those emotions, but we want to help move them comfortably through those emotions so we can get to that point where we can start to rationally think through these things. And I think we're starting to see that shift now. People are starting to settle in at home a little bit more. People are getting a little bit more comfortable with what working from home means and what working virtually means. We're starting to see that shift. And now it's really about, okay, how do we do this better? Step one was, how do we do it? And then step two became, now that we're doing it and we're starting to move through it, how do we do it better? And I think as we start to shift sort of into that reality, there is a greater expectation for people to be performing in a better and better way. And I know for somebody who I do some work with, that was something that their company has really focused on is, okay, we've done this now. We are all working from home, transition time over. Now we have to figure out how to do it well and look professional doing it and all those other pieces. And we've got to look for sort of those tools and ways that we can support people through this transition. So when we think about that, the growth mindset side of things is actually a really great place to start. So I just figured a really easy way to sort of start this off was for us to look at some just different sentences that represent a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I'm going to use a really silly example because it really isn't that critical, I'm sure. However, it's one that I think we can all relate to right now, and that's presenting or having meetings in a virtual form. And so I've been doing most of my meetings off of Zoom. So you think about that Zoom meeting, and for a lot of people, running a meeting off Zoom is a completely new experience, and it's something that they're going to have to do probably for the next little while, or off Zoom or Teams or whatever format they're using. But it's probably a new experience. So if I think to myself, if I get myself going onto this Zoom meeting and it goes completely wrong, it's a complete failure, it just doesn't work. My internet goes down, or I can't get I can't get the technology to work, I can't get my screen to share, whatever those aspects are that could happen in that situation that make the meeting fail. And in this situation, we're going to assume this is an important meeting. We're going to assume this is a client meeting. This is somebody that it was important for us to be able to execute. If I'm working from a point of a fixed mindset, I come out of the meeting and I say, I just failed and I can't do this, right? That's the failure is the limit of my abilities. I can't do this. And so if you start to think about the stories we tell ourselves in those situations, right? What leads me to say I can't do this? It could be that my mindset is around the fact that I can't use technology, or this is silly, it works in person, or it could be that, how do I make sure that I can't control the Wi-Fi? So how do I make sure that it runs? So there's all these sort of thoughts that go through our mind. And as these thoughts go through our mind, our brain has this really cool way of reinforcing those thoughts. So if today I try and use Zoom and I'm telling myself I'm never going to get it, I'm going to look for other things that reinforce that thought. It's similar to that whole philosophy that when you're going to buy a new car, all of a sudden everybody's driving the car you're going to buy. So we want to recognize that we're looking to support people through sort of this way of thinking. Now, if on the flip side, I'm operating from a growth mindset, So that same thing happens, that Zoom meeting crashes, it just doesn't work. I lose an account because of it. It's just not successful. And I failed, right? The fixed mindset focuses on the now. I failed, it's done. The growth mindset instead doesn't fix on the now, it thinks about where we're going. So in that growth mindset, I start to ask myself different questions. I start to ask myself questions like, okay, how else could I have a backup plan for the Wi-Fi? What else could I do to test in advance to make sure it works? How am I going to make sure this goes better next time? And it's really about me looking at it and not seeing it as it doesn't work, it's done. Instead, looking forward and looking at it as, okay, I'm going to do this again. So how do I make it work better? And when we're dealing sort of with this virtual world right now and with everything we're going through, the reality is we're going to make mistakes, probably a fair amount of them. And so we need to help people shift into this different thought process and into these different perspectives so they can keep going. And so that we know people are already stressed out and overwhelmed. This is a way that we can help people not add to that. We can't control what's happening in the outside world. What we can control is how we think through the things in our day-to-day life that we have a little bit of power over. So we want to help people move through that thought process. So we want to move people into that thought process of, I can learn to do anything I want. Challenges help me grow. My effort and attitude determines my limitations and abilities. Feedback's constructive. I'm inspired by the success of others, and I like to try new things. These skills, if we start really focusing on them now, when we do go back to normal or whatever that new normal is going to be, these are skills that are going to take our sort of mid-range performers and make them exceptional. So when we harness these skills now, it's going to really help people in the future. So I'm a big believer in trying to create actions that we can actually use and implement, ideally right away. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time sort of breaking some of these things down. So if we take growth mindset and really break it down, it's the belief that skills are not fixed. And you can have a growth mindset in some areas of your life and not have a growth mindset in other areas of your life. So I might be really willing to say, you know what, if I work really hard at it, I can learn to play an instrument and truly believe that I have the ability to learn that skill. But there might be another aspect of my life, say drawing, where I really just don't believe that I'm ever going to be able to draw well. And so there is sort of, you can have a fixed mindset in some areas and a growth mindset in others. So really, truly, we're trying to create as much of a growth mindset as often as possible. So it is about that belief that skills aren't fixed. It's about the fact that I believe that with enough determination and if with enough effort that I can do anything. And that we look at the fact that we actually get smarter through challenges. So they did, Carol Dweck is who all the mindset research is really, she's kind of like the thought leader in the area. And she did a lot of different tests with children and the way that they learned. And a lot of those tests were around the fact that if the children saw something and they told them that it didn't matter how many they got, it wasn't about how many they got right, it was about the process of learning, and helped sort of steer them in that direction, people would keep going longer. The kids would stay focused on a task longer. So it really is about changing the mindset that it's not always about the win. It's about the fact that I can learn and grow through the challenge. That challenge is what I'm trying to grab onto, because that challenge is where the reward is. So the reward comes from the learning, not from the final score, the final grade, or the win. And this is a bit of a shift, because I think for a lot of people sort of my age and older, we very much came from a world where we were told grades matter and scores matter, and that side of things. And then it shifted, but it's kind of shifted back. But we've never really been great at rewarding the journey. And so, or getting people to sort of move through that journey. So that's what we're really trying to work through. Now, if we think about that fixed mindset side of things, this is more of the belief that the skills and abilities I have, I'm either good at something or I'm not. They're born into me. I can't develop them. So it's about the fact that I believe that I'm just gifted in some areas, and some areas I'm just never going to be good at that. So if we think about athletes, it's a really great example of really sort of looking at that fixed mindset and growth mindset, because there's this sort of belief that these top level athletes are just really exceptional at what they do. And there's definitely some of that in there. But then you look at the best of the best, and they'll tell you how hard they work at something and how often they practice. Now, I am probably, basketball is my family's sport of choice, and I am never going to be as good as these top basketball players, as a LeBron or a Michael Jordan or as a Scottie Pippen. I'm showing my age. I'm never going to be as great as these guys, no matter how hard I work, because they do have some natural things like their height that are better than my natural things. However, you look at some of those, you listen to the things that people do, and it's I take 100 free throws before every single game. At every practice, I have to hit 100 shots before I move on to other things. Like, there's things that they do to help them get better and better and better. So it really is about finding that the reality is not that we can't get better. And not that it's just born into us or not. And the reward in that fixed mindset is the success. The reward is the win. The reward is the right now. And so I either fail, and therefore it's not a good feeling, or I win and it's a great feeling. And we tend to do this a lot with kids, with school, and the fact that we're pushing them for grades. Right? We're pushing them to try and get a grade, and we have to recognize that grade isn't necessarily what we want to focus on, because if we always focus on that end result, if it gets tough during the process, they're more likely to quit. So we want to reward the process, not just the end result. So I'm going to take a quick pause here before I get into the two tools as to what we can do to actually create this, and see if there are any questions just regarding growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
We don't have any questions as of yet, but I'll wait a couple of minutes for everyone to bring up some of the questions or maybe comments, and then I will let you know when things come up. So don't be shy, just ask a question and then we'll take it from there.
We're all learning how to virtually put people's hands up.
Yes, exactly. It's a different world. We do virtual coffees every day now.
Exactly. Okay, I'll keep going for now then.
Yeah, we don't have any questions coming up, so you can just carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. So like I said, I really like to create actions that you can implement. So I have two sort of different powers that we're all going to learn today that really help to create and foster that growth mindset. So the first is the power of yet, and the second is the power of curiosity. And these are really great tools to help foster this within your teams. So if we start with the power of yet, the old way of thinking was that people who were successful had really high self-confidence. And when Carol Dweck started to do her research, that was one of the philosophies that was sort of debunked, and that confidence wasn't what led to success. It was actually that belief of possibility that led people to keep going. And so when she started to do her research and started to recognize that that we could dispel this sort of concept of confidence, and it became more about resiliency. It became more about the fact that the people who actually kept trying, and the people who could keep moving, were the people who were finding more and more success. And they recognized it was their way of thinking and how they thought through things. And so to me, creating this power of yet is a really great way to build resiliency in our teams. It's a really great tool to get our teams seeing that when things get hard, we keep going. I say to people all the time, it's really easy to stay motivated and focused when things are happening really easily. When things are easy, it's easy to keep going. It's when things start to become more challenging that's when it becomes a little bit harder, and then it really becomes that test of resiliency. Again, we think of where we're at right now. When this was, we're going to all stay in our house for 2 weeks. I think a lot of people are like, cool, I got this. And it was pretty easy. As it became 4 weeks and now 6 and 8, now it's starting to feel like, okay, this might be a little bit harder. And you can start to sort of see and feel the shift in people right now, because now people have to think about it in a different way. They've now got to draw on different skills to get through. And so that's what we're really trying to create in this power of yet. So it's super easy. That's what I love about it. So where this came from originally was through a high school where the students actually didn't get grades. They were graded as I'm not there yet, and complete. So the students, if they in our traditional language failed a test, never knew that they weren't told they failed. They were told they haven't passed yet. And so it's a really cool way to start to look at things, because if I fail at something, it's over. Versus if I haven't passed yet, I'm still in the process of getting to the pass. And it shifts your mindset into action. It shifts your mindset into movement. So when we think about that power of yet, all we're doing is literally adding the word yet to the end of any sentence that has that level of disbelief. So we're not going to get through this yet, right? I don't know how to do this yet. I'm not able to do this yet. And so it shifts it from being that finite thought to being a process. And so it's a really, really small thing that if we as leaders can just help our team add the word yet to the end of their challenges, it will keep them trying to learn through the process and trying to get to a solution. It keeps people moving forward. That's ultimately the power in that one little tiny word. So one of the suggestions that I have in sort of managing virtually is I really believe that the more contact we can have right now, the better. And I know I'm hoping one of the things we keep from this new world is the fact that we are having more conversations and less emails. For whatever reason, we've shifted to this virtual world where we're like, well, we must talk face to face now about everything. And which is kind of cool, because a month ago we emailed about everything. And so my suggestion is I have an acronym that makes for a real quick, almost like morning huddle. And acronym is TEAM. And what we can do to sort of foster that is by the first thing is tell me something you're learning right now. or tell me something you learned yesterday. And if we take that T and take that initial conversation, number one, it's putting people into the mindset that they have to actually be trying to learn something. But it is also celebrating and encouraging learning. So versus tell me, the second thing is share a success from yesterday, right? Everyone shares success. So we're still celebrating successes, but the first thing we talk about is tell me something that you're not there yet with, right? Give me that lesson. So then we share a success from yesterday. We talk about what our actions are for today. And then the last thing is that the manager makes someone's day. You could have your team members make someone's day as well. But it's that opportunity to sort of praise. And my suggestion is that we look for opportunities to praise on learning, not always on the win. And I've led sales teams for 20 years. And I can tell you, I've shifted from celebrate winning. And what happens when those people stop winning is they think they're a failure and then they quit. Versus if we praise the process, they will get wins because they're doing the process. And what I know about sales teams and truly any level of team is we don't ever win if we stop moving. We will fail every time, no matter what it is. If we stop a project, it's never going to get to completion. If we stop researching, we're never going to find the solution. If we stop trying to find new business, we're never going to sell. So the more we can keep people moving, the better. So that's why we want to praise the process and not always the win. So I will take a pause before we move to curiosity. Any questions or anything on the power of yet?
The power of yet. We don't have any questions yet. I'll just wait a couple of minutes. I just thought I will add, I was listening to your story, and especially the time when you say it doesn't work yet. I'm not sure who actually joined us last session at the webinar. We, to my mistake and all technology, learning something new every day, we've shared links to join the live session few minutes before, and it turns out the link was broken, so no one was able to join us live. And going back to this mindset, being fixed, we could just say, that's it, no one can join, we'll just stop it now. But it's actually a great opportunity to learn from mistakes and make sure that certain actions will be implemented going forward. So that's a nice focus point. Checking the chat, we don't have any other questions, so I guess we can just carry on.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that brings up a really good point. Like, the reality of where we're sitting right now is that there's going to be so many things that don't go smoothly. So the more that we can find even humor in those mistakes or opportunity in those mistakes. I know I sat on a conference call the other day for a charity that I sit on the board for. I sat on hold for 15 minutes because they couldn't get the number to work. I don't know what was happening, but it didn't mean we didn't have our board meeting. It just meant we delayed the board meeting, and we messaged it out, and it became a little bit of a chuckle around the fact that we couldn't make it happen. So it is sort of just, I think the opportunity right now is, again, the fact that people are not expecting everything to be perfect. So there's a little bit more leeway in making mistakes right now. So if we can grab onto that and use it as a tool to actually create a culture going forward, it's a cool opportunity. So, so the next thing, oh, you're muted, Izabela.
Am I on now?
Yeah.
Yes. So we just have one question from Christine. A question is there a difference in effectiveness between a manager and a team member giving praise? Does it become disingenuous if coming from the manager always?
I I think there's positives in both. And I think the more that we can get teams praising each other, sorry, I'm going to back up. There's goods to both. And I think the best praise is the most authentic praise. So if a manager can authentically praise every single day, I think people love to get praise from their boss. They love to know they're doing a good job, but it needs to be authentic and sincere. So and again, sometimes when praise happens from peers, if it's forced praise, I think we've all been in a circle at some point where they said, throw the ball and say something nice about somebody. And it becomes really just unauthentic words, and it's words, not really praise. So whatever is going to create the more authenticity, I think the better. The more specific it can be, the more real that it is the way that I would go. I think right now looking for opportunities of praise from management is important, because I think people are looking for connection to their leaders right now, since they're not sitting there, since you don't see the work in the same way as we used to. I think people are looking to know that I'm doing a good job. But I do think, especially when we go back to normal, there is a lot of power in authentic peer praise, because it creates such a great culture when you can say, you know what, Sally did this absolutely amazing job and really helped me out the other day, and I'm so grateful for it. So I think whatever's going to be the most authentic is going to be the most effective. Okay. Is that good now?
We don't have any other questions, so we can just move on. I just wanted to share a very, very good point. I guess just to add to your point, Melissa, we discovered last week as well, we have many people that are introverts and extroverts. So for some people, it's a natural a challenge to even go out and praise and say anything out loud, just because they normally don't do that in a day-to-day basis. So it's very important for managers just to encourage and then question, kind of coach and support those individuals even more in virtual worlds to what it would be in a face-to-face.
Yeah, and I think recognizing too, in a virtual world, we don't, because of the delays that happen and the fact that you can't really see somebody's body language as well, and you can't make eye contact in the same way. One, it leads to extroverts talking over each other a lot, I think, because they can't tell somebody else is about to go. And I think it does actually support people who aren't naturally comfortable talking out in meetings to talk out even less, because I can kind of hide behind my camera. So, because you can't really see me, even though you're totally looking at me. So I think even looking at that, as well as looking at different ways to encourage conversation in meetings and trying to come up with different ways to create safety in those meetings right now as well, is something to just consider. Okay, so I'm going to move to the power of curiosity. And so if we look at what curiosity is, just from a definition standpoint, it's a strong desire to learn or know something. And I've started talking about curiosity a lot in the last year, because I have really found that curiosity seems to be lost. I feel like technology and sort of how we gain information has changed so significantly in the last 10, 15 years that it's actually impacted how curious we are. Because our sort of reality is if we want to know something, we go to Google. And whatever pops up first is now the reality of the information that we take. In a lot of cases, I know not everybody is like that, but there's a lot of people that it's like, well, Google says, and we take that information as fact. And it's always whatever comes up first is usually the fact that we take. And so we research quite differently now than when we used to go to a library and sit down at a table with 5 or 6 different books and really like pine through this information and really try and data drive. It's different now. And so what it feels like is, it feels like people are much more definite in their opinions around things, because they have so much easier access to information, where in the past, because the access to information wasn't as easy to get, if I wanted to learn something, I had to ask people questions, or I had to put some effort into trying to learn it. And I just really feel that that has shifted how curious people really are. And when we're less curious, it means we're more closed in our opinions. And so when we're trying to think about sort of that growth mindset, if you think about growth mindset as the journey that we're driving, curiosity is like the gas in the car. So if I'm driving down my path through growth mindset, trying to learn, right, and trying to take in, curiosity is how I keep that sort of motivation to keep learning. And it's what keeps the car going forward. So when we think about the power of curiosity, there's a couple sort of ways that I suggest trying to create a culture where people start to be more curious. So the one strategy that I suggest is to look at both sides of the equation. So any time that you're looking for information on something or trying to understand something, look for, if you're going to Google or however you're going to research, look for opposing views. So again, if we think right now about, I'll use politics as an example. You're never supposed to talk about politics, so we're just going to get risky right now. So if we use politics as an example, if I get all my news information from one news channel, again, for the sake of easy examples, if I get all my information from CNN, it's going to provide me information that is very one-sided, versus if I get all my information from, say, Fox, it's going to provide the other side. So if I'm only getting my information from one source, my opinions and theories will be formed from that source. If every time there's something I want to learn about, I learn about it from both sides, I'm more able to then actually put myself in a position to make a decision on my own opinion on it. And that research stimulates curiosity and questions and sort of that willingness to look for the other side, which I think right now, and if we're thinking about growth mindset and we're thinking about that journey, there's a lot of power in trying to look to things from other people's perspectives. The next thing is about understanding where you're operating from. And this is something that I've recently read. I read a book probably about 6 months ago, and it's called The 15 Commitments of a Conscious Leader. And it's from a group called the Conscious Leadership Group. And they have a very simple model. And it's a model that I've really sort of fallen in love with and grabbed onto. And the model is literally a straight black line. And you're either working above the line or below the line. And when you're operating from above the line, you're open, curious, and committed to learning. And when you're operating below the line, you're closed, defensive, and committed to being right. So I'll say it again. So above the line is open, curious, and committed to learning. And below the line is closed, defensive, and committed to being right. And what they're really big on making sure that we realize is that it's actually not about one being right or wrong, and one being the way to operate. It's about the fact that we understand where we're sitting in that conversation. And I'm sure we can all picture a time where we had really strong feelings on something. And so in that conversation, we were committed to being right because it was something we were super passionate about and really wanted people to understand, right? We really wanted it. And so there might have been a really good reason for us to be committed to being right. But it's recognizing that when we're so focused on committed to being right, that we're not then able to actually be curious about why somebody else might be thinking a certain way. So we want to just recognize, where are we operating from? Are we above the line or are we below the line? Because if the more that we can put ourselves above that line and trying to be curious and open to learning, especially right now in virtual teams, right? I hear lots of stories of companies that have people reporting in every single hour what they've accomplished or what they're doing. And yes, we need to manage productivity right now. But the reality is, if I've got 2 kids at home and all these other things going on, maybe there's a reason I didn't get much done for the last half an hour, but maybe I will get it done later on. So it really is just trying to understand and be really curious right now. And I think there's a lot of power in that right now. And the final piece is taking pleasure in the journey. So again, we go back to that growth mindset. It's about the journey. It's about the road, right? And so when we can take pleasure in that process of trying to understand, it keeps us going forward. So that's what we really want to do with this power of curiosity. So when we turn this into action, what does this look like? So from a leader standpoint, it looks like leading from the front. It looks like being curious and trying to understand people's decisions, people's actions, people's behaviors right now, as opposed to assuming why people are acting or behaving in a certain way, or judging why people are acting or behaving in a certain way, and instead really trying to be curious about it and stepping back outside of potentially our frustration or our stress or our own stuff and trying to understand. Doesn't mean we have to accept people's actions and behaviors. It's about trying to look at those perspectives, though. When we look at the opportunity for others to be curious, again, if we go back to what we talked about right at the very beginning, with people being in this state of stress right now and emotions and frustrations being elevated, if we step back and really look at the fact that if we can help people be curious, we probably have some conflict happening. Especially in teams where there's not as much team connection or belief in what others are doing. We're in the situation where people, because we can't see what people are doing, and because communication is different, people fill in the gaps of unknown communication with whatever stories they tell themselves. And those stories tend to be negative. So if I have a lot of gap, I'm going to fill that gap with something, and it's my own perceptions, it's my own opinions, it's my own views on things. And those don't tend to naturally float to the positive for most people. So because of that, we want to help team members be curious right now. So teaching them questions to ask, or asking them questions like, why would someone act like that? Why do you think someone would behave in that way? What's another reason? Get them to go to both sides. Give me an opposing reason why someone might behave in that way, right? What other considerations could there be in this situation? And really trying to get people to think from a point of curiosity. Because when we are working virtually, I do think that we're going to see sort of more opportunity for conflict. And then the final one is to encourage curiosity on teams. So again, looking for different ways, kind of like we talked about with the meetings, that when we're having these virtual meetings, how do we ensure that we're getting opinions and ideas from everybody at the table right now? What are some of the questions you can ask? I would suggest as a leader, going into these meetings or conversations with questions prepared to try and spark dialogue and strategies to call on people within those conversations. So it's not the same person over and over again, and call people by name, or intentionally draw people's feedback where you know it's something that you really want to get their information on, and look for those opportunities to really create that culture of conversation and debate, and build trust in the fact that curiosity is rewarded. It's not about being right. It's about contributing to the ideas. It's about contributing to the journey. So looking for those opportunities to do that. So if we think about combining that power of yet and the power of curiosity, we really have the opportunity to create an environment where people know that if they're just not there yet, right? I'm not quite there yet, but I have this like really strong urge to learn and to keep trying. and to also understand what's happening, that what that's going to build is this really cool resiliency within our teams where people will just keep going. And when challenge happens, as it inevitably will right now, that it's going to help the team feel confident that it's going to be okay. That it's going to help you as a leader feel confident that if people get stuck, that they're going to look for solutions. And so it really is, when we combine that yet with curiosity, we take the two powers and they become this like awesome superpower, which is really cool to have happen. And I think sort of my closing thought is how important this resiliency is right now, and how important these tools are right now, because the only thing that is certain right now is how uncertain everything is. So because that seems to be the case, and I think I'm hopeful that in the next few weeks we're going to start to feel more certain in the direction that we're going, but we don't know that quite yet. So I think the more that we can set people up to feel confident in the uncertainty by believing that they can keep working through things, the more successful it's going to help to keep our teams engaged and happy and motivated through times that are completely out of their control. So with that, I will open up the floor for questions.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very powerful message. So we just wait for people to share their questions. So we have actually first one coming up. At the start, you mentioned that in a stressful situation, fight or flight takes over, which is a very selfish goal to survive. How do we turn this stressful situation into less of a survival goal for ourselves and more into a mindset of helping others instead?
That's a really good question. My suggestion would be is that curiosity piece. So I think there's a few sort of aspects to what's happening right now. Part of it that I often talk to people about is control what you can control and not what you can't control. And so right now, we can't control when the government says we can go back to work. We can't control when we're allowed to not be 6 feet apart from people. We can't control those things right now. They're not within that's not within our power. And so if we get caught in the details of that, it can become really, really stressful. Versus, so if we can step back and use that power of curiosity to start to reflect on others. So I'll use social media as an example. What I've noticed is there's a lot of people on social media right now that have judgments on a lot of things, and to me, I'm perceiving a lot of that judgment as people's stresses coming out and people being frustrated. And so because people are frustrated, the way that I do things must be the right way. So if we go back to sort of that model from the conscious leadership group, instead of seeing it as my way is the right way, asking questions around why might somebody need to go to the grocery store a couple times a week, or why might somebody need to leave a house when we're being told not to, and start to ask some questions that step outside of ourselves and instead start to wonder and to be curious. It helps us to not, it just helps us sort of shift our own mindset. So I would really use that line right now and ask yourself, if you're feeling really opinionated or you're feeling really stressed, start to consider other possibilities, because then it might just sort of take it down a level. And at the same time, be forgiving of yourself too. It's not going to be perfect. We are going to make mistakes, and there's going to be challenges. And so as somebody who is quite a perfectionist, it's been a challenge for me to be okay with the fact that I don't present on a stage anymore. I can't walk around. I can't move. I can't do some of those things that I've always told are the things that make you a great presenter. So it's like, well, I can't fix that. So I got to let that go because I can't change that aspect of things. But if I got really caught in it, then does it mean I don't present at all? So it's like looking at what are the things that are truly within our power and what are the things we can just let go. I think so to summarize that, control the controllables, try and operate from above the line, and really be forgiving to yourself.
Very well said. There are some things we cannot control, but I think it's a matter of every day is a new learning day for all of us. So we can all learn from day by day, learn from little steps and failures, whatever else is happening in the background. And as a team or individual, we can definitely get stronger. Beautiful. So just a few comments coming around. Great presentation. Thank you very much. A great topic to listen to today. A good thing for all of us is that we are all learning this new normal together.
100%.
That's a very nice message. Yes. So if there are no other questions, I think it was an absolute pleasure, obviously, to have everyone else with us today. But thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us today, and we look forward to work on the partnership with you going forward. So I know there are some things coming up, so you have details shared for yourself, and with everyone else from Fanshawe CTs. I just wanted to mention we are in this together. We all learn a new day. What was yesterday may not be there tomorrow, so it's something we're just trying to implement, and new strategies. We're trying to support the businesses and leaders around. So if there is anything that we can do more of, maybe different of, we are open to feedback as well. So thank you very much.